Throughout the whole of Western civilization, more and more people are becoming increasingly skeptical of the mainstream political line. The moment of American global military dominance seems to be over, as does the dominance of the American dollar. And in light of this, many Westerners are searching through the ruins of history in order to find some alternative. Some people have rediscovered the socialism and communism of the 19th and 20th centuries. Some look towards the recent past of America, hoping to recapture the mythical purity of the Reagan era. Some have looked towards the distant past, blaming all of society's ills on technological excesses and longing for something simpler, be that an agrarian homestead or a cave full of hunter-gatherers. Some have even looked back upon fascism with a dark, misguided hope for a return to glory and power. Many people are looking backwards, but Russian political philosopher Alexander Dugin is looking forward, attempting to lay the groundwork for a new theory of politics, one he calls the fourth political theory. Alexander Gelyevich Dugin was born in Moscow on January 7, 1962. His early adulthood saw him become interested in politics, philosophy, esotericism, and the occult, drawing inspiration from dissident Russian fascist movements, communism, and the perennialist traditionalism of Julius Evola and Rene Guénon. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he and Edward Lemonov co-founded the National Bolshevik Party, which sought to merge the ideas of nationalism and fascism with Bolshevik communism. Using the writings of German communist Ernst Nietzsche as inspiration. After a few short years, disputes between Lemonov and Dugin led to Dugin's withdrawal from the party. It is here when Dugin's written career begins, publishing his first major work, the phenomenal Foundations of Geopolitics, in 1997, just 1 year prior to a split with Lemonov. His works since then have influenced a wide variety of political actors, from members of the General Staff of the Russian military to former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, from dissident communist voices in America to pro-republic political analysts in Iran. He has been described as Putin's brain by Western media outlets, and has voiced open support for the Russian military action in the Ukraine. It is nearly impossible to discount his influence, and for that reason alone he deserves some attention and understanding. What does Dugin mean by the fourth in the term fourth political theory? For Dugin, modern history has seen the rise and fall of three political theories. The first theory, liberalism, the dominant theory of Western society, has endured the challenges of the later theories and is only now inarguably on the decline. The second, communism, was the first modern political theory to challenge liberalism, but which, for Dugin at least, saw its demise with the collapse of the USSR. The third political theory, fascism, arose as a challenge to both communism and liberalism, but which imploded long before it could come close to overcoming either. The fourth political theory, a term which refers to the next step in political evolution beyond liberalism, is, and this is openly acknowledged by Dugin, an open question, not yet defined by any concrete positions other than total opposition to liberal modernity. It is a striving towards the future, and its tools are everything that predates liberalism, the traditional, as Dugin calls it. Everything that has opposed liberalism while it still exists, namely both communism and fascism, and even elements of liberalism itself, both the liberalism of the postmodern era and the modern eras. In traditionalism, Dugin sees the essence of all existing civilizations, the eternal particularities that cannot be extinguished by time and ideology. In communism, Dugin sees the strongest systematic criticism of liberal economy, of capitalism, that has ever existed. In fascism, Dugin sees an essential emphasis on the ethnos, the organic community. In liberalism itself, Dugin sees the value of freedom and fluidity in regard to potential possibilities and interpretations of the world and of being. All other elements of the prior political theories are to be abandoned as that which led to the failures of these theories: the materialism of communism, the racism of fascism, the rejection of God and the eternal of liberalism. This rejection of God, inherent in liberalism, highlights another important aspect of Dugin's fourth political theory, in that, for Dugin, the challenge of overcoming liberalism is not one to be taken lightly. It is not something passive that can be embarked upon at a leisurely pace. Rather, it is an apocalyptic conflict between humanity and the kingdom of the Antichrist. That may sound extreme, and it certainly is unorthodox, but it is a position that clarifies some of the other extremities in Dugin's thought. For him, the fight against liberalism is not a debate or a discussion. It is a war. One of the public fronts of this war being the conflict between Russia and the government of the Ukraine, along with its NATO financiers. For Dugin, NATO is the military arm of the kingdom of the Antichrist, and Russia's intervention is part of a holy war. This mindset contributes to the fourth political theory's answer to the religious question, this answer being heavily influenced by perennialist philosophy. For Dugin, the battle against the Antichrist is not one to be waged by one religious group or sect, but by all of them, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, understanding the kingdom they oppose in their particular language of their own traditions. Whether that be the Antichrist of Christianity, the Dajjal of Islam, or the Kali Yuga of Hindus. What is important for Dugin is not a particular expression of faith, but a common enemy found in that which seeks to destroy all faiths. This concept Dugin sometimes refers to as an attack against the center by the periphery, and it is consistent with his incorporation of all forms of political and philosophical thought. This plays into the fourth political theory's emphasis on what Dugin calls multipolarity. The idea that the post-liberal world will not be dominated by one system, one country, or one people. Dugin calls this unipolarity. But rather, each and every political body will be accountable to only its own constituents. Russia will be governed by the Russians, China by the Chinese, America by the Americans, and so on and so on. Dugin calls this future the era of civilizational states, bigger than the small nation-states of the modern era, but more particular than total hegemony by one or two states over the whole world, as we saw during the Cold War and after the collapse of the USSR. In summary, Dugin's fourth political theory can be briefly described as a total united front against liberalism, the only precondition to which is a total opposition to the common enemy. This united front is open to communists, fascists, Christians, Muslims, Jews, atheists, Africans, Arabs, Americans, Europeans, Asians, and anyone in between, insofar as the common enemy, the unipolar liberal world order, is acknowledged. I have yet to see a contemporary philosopher who is as emphatically open to new possibilities, new visions for the future, as Alexander Dugin. He is the only modern conservative who does not predicate his conservatism on re-establishing some prior state of being. He doesn't just want to go back to the 90s before everything was gay and political. He doesn't want to go back to the 50s where everyone lived in idyllic Norman Rockwell paintings. He doesn't want to go back to the 18th century where capitalism was the hip new revolutionary idea. He doesn't want to return to feudalism and live under a king appointed by God. He doesn't want to return to the Stone Age. No. Dugin is consistent in his striving towards the future. He knows that the forms of the past cannot simply be reinstated, and that the essence that these forms reflected can only be recaptured through thoroughly combing through the dirt and grime of history to uncover every hidden piece of gold that has been lost and forgotten. For that, at the very least, he deserves praise. If you find yourself standing in opposition to the current state of affairs, something about the way your country is governed just doesn't sit right with you, then Alexander Dugin has something to offer you. If you don't agree with everything he says, that's fine. I certainly don't. But his forward-thinking approach is something that we all can learn from. In terms of where to start, the book The Fourth Political Theory will serve as a good introduction to those more philosophically inclined. Those more interested in history and political theory would enjoy The Foundations of Geopolitics. And to the modern American conservative, I would strongly recommend The Great Reset versus The Great Awakening, links to which can be found in the description. Thank you.